Exandria Unlimited, Episodes 3 and 4, A Glorious Return, and By the Roads. Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Exandria Unlimited Summarized, where I go through Exandria Unlimited and talk about what we can learn from the DM, the players, and my thoughts on how everything went down. As I just stated, we're going to be going through Episodes 3 and 4 today, and this is where things start to get a little bit more exciting, while also taking a little bit to actually get into the action. I'll go ahead and just open up with saying the middle of the story, I feel, personally, is the weakest in the entire portion of it. It feels like they sort of amble around a lot and don't really get to the exciting parts or more into the story until later. But I promise, I feel very strongly that the last few sessions make it very worth getting through this portion. So with that being said, there's really not much need for an introduction other than that. So let's jump right into Session 3, A Glorious Return. Immediately jumping right out the bat, we already have one conundrum that the party is going to have to face. And that's the fact that in the last session, they were told to return to the city of Amon in order to be able to find somebody who might be able to translate the rune they found on top of the Ono Plateau. That individual is none other than the rune child himself, Sean Gilmore. The problem is that they had already decided that they were not going to return to the city of Amon, as they had made a powerful enemy in the strange group known as the Nameless Ones. Their intention had just been to run away and avoid it. Unfortunately, it seems like that's not going to be an option for them. If they want to figure out what happened with this plateau and why it appeared out of nowhere and what the strange rune on the top of it is, they're going to have to return. So they have to figure out how to get into the city unknown. Their first decision is to go through a different gate than the one that they had exited from. A good start, but pretty basic. However, they also decide to change their appearances. Most of them just do superficial stuff, changing their hairdos, changing their clothes. They even attempt to glue some of Fern's fur on top of Orm's head in order to be able to make him seem like he has longer hair than he actually does. However, the person who seems to have the most effective disguise is Dariax. As it's revealed, apparently he has a cloak which allows him to cast Disguise Self at will. However, this is more powerful than just your regular disguise self. The illusion is powerful enough that even if you were to touch it, you can feel the illusion as if it were real. It's not quite Alter Self, as it's not actually changing Dariax. The illusion can't just be seen through by just touching it, making it a very powerful item. This also lets us know that each of these characters probably does have a pretty powerful magic item, and Abria most likely gave it to them as they started the campaign. However, Dariax, being Dariax, does not just decide to disguise himself into any random person. No, they were talking about having a distraction, and Dariax said he's got it, and decides to turn himself into a very curvy, flirtatious woman who apparently he knew in the past as one of his ex-girlfriends. I would keep an eye on this character. It does end up having an impact later in the story, and is apparently somewhat intrinsic to Dariax's backstory. Unfortunately, Dariax's version of a distraction is really just calling all attention possible to him and, by proxy, the rest of his group. He flirts with the guards to get them through the gates, however, not everybody is able to slip through. Dorian and Fern end up getting caught, mostly because they're the two most flashy, being one of them is a satyr and the other is a very ostentatious bard. In a panic, in order to be able to get them away from the guards, Opal tries to create a distraction by suddenly screaming out that she's lost her toddler and starts asking anybody if they can help her find her daughter Nancy. Of course, people, very concerned about the fact that there's apparently a missing child, begin to try to help her find Nancy, and through some strange interactions, she eventually ends up coming to Orm and claiming that that's Nancy. This leads to one of the funniest interactions I've ever seen and an amazing showcase of Liam O'Brien's incredible comedic timing as he looks up like a deer in the headlights and says,
"Nancy!" She looks at Orm. "Where have you been?"
Mother.
I cannot lie, this had me dying of laughter as one of the first true moments in the campaign where I genuinely just lost it. It's clear that this campaign has a much more comedic tone and is much more loosey-goosey and just everybody having fun, but this is the first time that it really just got me, I don't know, it just really got me laughing, and is the first time I really started to feel a little more invested in this campaign. I am glad that I stuck out till this point. Anyways, that ends up not being enough, and in order to make things even more complicated, Fern ends up borrowing Dorian's flute, and they start to pretend to be part of a music and dance group while they use Dariax's disguise to do some sort of ribbon dancing as they move through the crowd. Again, this is the exact opposite of staying low, but this is the kind of campaign we're dealing with and the characters we've got. It is really, really amusing, and I actually enjoyed this quite a bit, but part of me as a DM was cringing just knowing that this was giving Abria way too much ammunition to use. All in all, however, they end up entering the city, but as they do so, Fern is almost immediately shot with some sort of poison dart by a black-hooded person. Obviously, and shockingly, their distraction didn't work at keeping people not noticing them. They immediately make a beeline to Gilmore's Glorious Goods, being very aware that they're being followed. Their hope is to be able to duck into there and be able to hide for a while, hopefully shaking their current tail. Fortunately, Dariax, in an uncharacteristic use of intelligence, uses his cloak to disguise himself as an old dwarf, and as they duck into an alley, he's able to talk to the pursuers and end up sending them off in the wrong direction, claiming that the group went the other way. With this problem temporarily solved, they manage to double back and make it back to Gilmore's Glorious Goods. As they enter, we are all immediately filled with a sense of more nostalgia as we get to see, of course, the inside of the infamous and famous Gilmore's Glorious Goods. Abria does a pretty good job describing the entire scene as we remember, as well as the gnome clerk waiting for them, Inanya. As they inquire to her about Sean Gilmore, unfortunately she tells them that he's currently in Marquette. However, she can take them to speak to the manager. Now, I'm going to talk about how I have a problem with the way that Abria plays other NPCs, and we'll get to that in a second, but the way she plays Sherry is really, really good, and I actually love both the characters that she's introduced right now. Both Inanna and Sherry just bring a sort of life and amazing adorableness to this entire scene that I didn't expect and I really appreciated. There's even a moment where Sherry realizes that she might be talking to a bard when she speaks with Dorian, and she immediately gets all flustered, which of course is a callback all the way to Campaign 1 in a small little moment where Scanlan sings to Sherry and causes her to get incredibly flustered.
So I have to pay you and sing to you.
Yes, yes. Go on a business here. Yes.
Right.
Pulls the books out.
I bring out my something. Sherry baby, Sherry baby, Sherry, won't you come home tonight? Come home tonight. You better ask your mama. Tell her you're with a gnome. Why don't you come on to my king? Pay for the book, I hear you.
You see, like, her face is flush, and she kind of like...
A really fun callback, which I enjoyed a lot and really felt like it gave a lot of consistency and character to her. They attempt to show Sherry the rune that they drew in order to be able to get some information, however she quickly tells them that she does not recognize this. They explain to her the situation and that it is of grave importance, and finally she decides to go upstairs and use a magical plume and candle to send a message, and only moments later, he arrives. Sean Gilmore has entered the building. Now, here's where I'm going to talk about the problems I have with Abria playing different NPCs. In my mind, if you're going to be taking over a campaign and world from another DM, you want to make it your own. I mean, that's very obvious, and she has done that, and she does an amazing job of doing so. It is very obvious that she has a ton of respect for the work that Matt has done, but they had a conversation before where Matt told her to make this her own. It wouldn't mean anything if she was just trying to imitate Matt, and I agree with that. And I have no proof that that conversation actually happened, but I have a strong belief that it did. That being said, in my head, if you're going to be playing such an integral character from a previous campaign, that would be something that I would put a lot of work into to be able to make sure I play it correctly. I'll be honest, Sean Gilmore did not feel like Sean Gilmore when Abria was playing him. And no, I don't expect her to just play him perfectly. I don't expect her to imitate Matt. I don't want her to imitate Matt. But there's a difference of playing somebody the exact same way and making sure to keep consistency in their character decisions. This might be super nitpicky, and maybe it's just because I'm a really big fan of Gilmore and I was excited to see him again and was upset that I was disappointed, which I will admit, it could just be my problem, and I'm okay with that. But to me, it seems she leaned far more into Gilmore's more flirtatious side and not enough into the genuine charm that he seemed to have otherwise. Gilmore flirted, yes, but he flirted with the intention of getting close to people and letting them know that he saw something entertaining in them. To me, it felt a lot here that Gilmore was just flirting for the sake of flirting, because that's what he did in the original campaign. Again, I can't stress enough how much this is just my own opinion, and I understand it's very nitpicky and does not actually address the story, but it felt like something I wanted and needed to mention. And if anybody disagrees with me, please let me know in the comments below. That's totally okay. But again, this is just something I wanted to mention because I talked about the ways that I wanted to talk about how Abria DM'd, and this was one of those important parts. To me, if you're going to be taking over for another DM, it's important to make it your own, but it's also important to keep the core characteristics and the heart of something, and I just did not feel that Sean Gilmore had the heart here that he did in the original campaign. And it's not to say that Abria can't do that, because when she described Amon, I felt like it was Amon. When she described and played Sherry, I felt like it was Sherry. But for Gilmore, it just, I don't know, lacked what I wanted. But with that out of the way, Gilmore ends up being a true shining light in darkness, a very helpful NPC who is willing to stick his neck out for them and put the information they need in their hands when no other NPC has done so far. Immediately, they fill him in the entire situation, and he remains incredibly enraptured and very interested in all of the information that they've gathered for him. He even notices that Fern is poisoned and casts Lesser Restoration on her, showing his true kind heart and willingness to just want to help out those who need it. However, there's a lot of information to get to, and the party quickly feels that they can trust him, and so Dariax chooses to bring out the Thorned Crown in order to show it to him. Immediately, Gilmore seems concerned and asks if Dariax has been touching it, and then Dariax, who at this point is still unaware that the last session his eyes turned black from grabbing it, simply says yes. At that point, Gilmore slowly offers him a mirror, and Dariax sees for the first time the fact that his eyes have been cursed, and the fact that his party has mentioned nothing about it so far. This is when things go from bad to worse. Not only does he notice his eyes, but he begins to see illusory spiders crawling all over every single person in the room, which really just evokes a feeling of heebie-jeebies. It's at this point that Gilmore does in fact identify the circlet as one of the vestiges of divergence, specifically the one linked to Lolth. They all tell him their concerns of it, but at this point, we see one of the true through lines of the campaign mentioned. Gilmore insists to them that yes, Lolth might be evil, but the circlet is not. The circlet is only power. He insists to them that power is only what you do with it. You cannot inherently say anything is evil or good. Magic is power, but it is not evil or good, only how you use it. Keep this concept in mind, as it will end up being one of the important through lines of the entire campaign. Gilmore looks at them all, and we see a very sweet moment that I actually genuinely appreciate from Abria. There's a genuine moment where he seems like he wants to take the circlet from them, but he looks around and he sees a group of young adventurers who have stumbled into his shop and have a lot of heart but don't know what they're doing yet. And though Abria does not spell it out, it is very clear that in that moment he sees a young Vox Machina standing in front of him, and he realizes the potential of what they have as long as somebody trusts in them and believes in them. In that moment, he chooses to take a risk and tells them that he will not take the circlet from them. If they desire to give it to him, they can, but he'll allow them to keep it. Keep in mind, this is a vestige of divergence, something worth starting a war over, and in that moment, Gilmore is looking at this group and trusting them because of his memories of Vox Machina. Even all this way forward, Vox Machina continues to affect lives around them. I know I have problems with the way that Abria played Gilmore, but in this moment I couldn't appreciate it more. This truly felt like Sean Gilmore was in front of them, and he had trust and faith in this group because of the friends that he had grown old with. An honestly touching moment that I don't think quite got the recognition it deserved. However, in order to make sure that they can in fact get rid of the circlet if they so desire, he gives them a one-time use magical box in which they simply need to put it in, close it, and it will be immediately whisked to his shop. With this given to them, Dariax promises not to touch the circlet anymore, and Gilmore casts Lesser Restoration on him as well in order to return his eyes to normal. For now, everything is set, and the party feels confident that they can move forward with the circlet without it being an immediate problem. However, this is only half the conversation, and they have to go back to talking about the mysterious sigil. Still uncertain if it's sigil or sigil. Gilmore is able to identify it as a truly ancient magic from the pre-Calamity civilization in the south. It's been lost in the jungles of the Riffinmis Peninsula, and it is likely that this single civilization is what they need in order to be able to figure out what it is that they're missing. They learn it was an ancient culture that was neutral about the sources of magic, uncaring whether it came from good or evil, nature or humanoid, and instead they simply respected and honored every magic no matter where it came from. Again, I told you, this theme will be important. Unfortunately, the civilization was lost in the Calamity, but if the party can find the ruins of their civilization, they might be able to find some runic writing and use it as a sort of Rosetta Stone to be able to translate the sigil that they currently have in front of them. With this information given, they let him know about the Nameless Ones, and Gilmore offers them a ride outside of the city gate in order to be able to protect them. This information also comes with them informing him that Posca is the one chasing them, and he warns them that Posca is in fact the leader amongst the Nameless Ones. Again, I'll go back to my previous complaints. It did not feel like Posca was quite as intimidating or as capable as needed to be the leader amongst them, and it felt a little odd that she was doing the grunt work of simply carving illusory scripts onto doors, but as we soon learn, she's far more than she seems, and I'm at least glad that she eventually does show her true colors and how capable she truly is. With this done, Gilmore offers the party a friend's discount, and they go on a small shopping trip, buying quite a few several things, having some very cute interactions with the two shopkeepers, before eventually heading on their way. After the small shopping interaction, they leave Gilmore's Glorious Goods and are introduced to a very large purple and pink emblazoned cart with Gilmore's Glorious Goods written on the side of it, and glitter spewing all out the back. Yes, a very much Gilmore cart, to be certain. This is the ride that they were promised, and they all hop in and begin to head towards the southern gate in order to be able to hire horses for the balance of their journey southward. However, after about half an hour, the carriage suddenly stops, and they hear voices arguing outside. That's when they feel someone climb aboard into the driver's seat, and suddenly we realize that something is not right. Orem takes a look outside and immediately sees somebody in a red leather coat in the driver's seat. Only through quick reflexes does he pull his head back in as he dodges a crossbow bolt that was fired directly at him. The situation has become clear and dire. Posca is now driving their cart, and they are flanked all around by the Nameless Ones. Inside, the party talks about what they might do, coming up with a plan to stab her in the butt before they hear her call out that she can hear them planning. And she then makes it clear why she's here, as if they didn't already know. She wants the residuum in the circlet. They belong to her. Now, as I said earlier, this is the first time that we really feel like Posca might be a legitimate threat. In the middle of the city, she has managed to surround this cart and take over it, almost immediately after they started setting off. Not only that, she knows exactly what they've stolen from her. Before, I did not believe that Posca was a legitimate threat, but now it is very clear that she is dangerous, and this could be a very potentially deadly situation for the party. Things go from bad to worse and even more dangerous as Dorian attempts to lie to them and say that they sold everything at Gilmore's, and she straight up tells them that she will kill Gilmore in order to be able to take everything back. Keep in mind, Gilmore is a war hero and legend at this point. He fought alongside Vox Machina. People know who he is. And she, without hesitation, says that she will kill him. This is the Posca I wanted to see. Truly dangerous, and I'm really curious as to where she was when there was the whole bumbling, stuttering oaf that originally met the party. I think at this point Abria has officially decided who this character is, and they are not to be messed with. Part of me wonders if she just genuinely underestimated the party and didn't treat them as a serious threat before, but now that she's seen what they're doing, she will not give them any chances. Dariax, being the kind soul that he is, tells everybody he doesn't want to get Gilmore killed, and they have to figure out how to get out of this despite their outnumbering. This is where the single most clutch play in the entire campaign happens. As they start to get ready to exit the cart, Fern out of nowhere casts Charm Person on Posca, and with it succeeding, she immediately tells Posca that she knows that there's something important they have to do, and Posca should step aside so that they can get it done. With this Charm Person in effect, Posca, seeing them as friends, tells everybody to stand down and allows them to leave. However, Abria does something I find very interesting. She lets them know that they can see behind Posca's eyes, pure, burning fury and hatred, almost trying to scream as this Charm Person holds her in place and prevents her from doing what she wants to and instead treating them as a friend. I've always treated Charm Person as just a general, haze. You don't really know what you're doing. But I found it very interesting and a very fun interaction to know that she was just barely being held back by this spell. Again, really getting across how dangerous and furious this individual is. Without this Charm Person, they would not have gotten out easily, and I really think that this really saved them from a very dangerous situation and truly communicates the kind of person Posca is. Well done on Abria's part. However, with nothing more for Posca to do, they taunt her, leave, and drive very quickly outside. As they begin to leave, Dariax leans out and waves the circlet at Posca and calls out to her, "Gotcha!" Immediately, Posca breaks the spell and lets out a loud scream as they pick up the pace and barely get out of the city in time. Always the level-headed one, Orem is worried about Gilmore and what might happen because of what they said, so he quickly writes him a note letting him know what happened and puts it in the box. Orem continues to show that he has a good heart and cares for other people, but he has just given up their only chance of getting rid of the circlet quickly. He's committed to keeping this and truly figuring out how to take care of it safely. Only moments later, Gilmore gives them a sending spell, letting them know thank you and to be safe. And with that, they are on their own, out of the city, out of help, and on their way to a different destination inside this strange glittering cart. A truly tense and character decision-filled ending to a session. This is when I first began to get hooked. Things are getting serious, and I'm genuinely excited to see where they go next. Episode 4, By the Road. The party continues to drive south. However, because of some flubbed animal handling checks, they end up having some issues and Fern has to hop out in order to be able to get the horses kick-started, which almost ends up having her left behind. Because of this entire event, they discover that the glitter that's being shot out of the back of the cart only lasts for about a few minutes, but they're beginning to get concerned about it. And so they use Dorian's cape as a way of being a diaper for the glitter, essentially. With this issue covered so that they aren't followed, they continue on their way, and for about 2 weeks there isn't any issues as they continue to travel. Fern, however, suddenly realizes that this road is close and familiar to one that she's seen before. Without warning, she starts heading off into the woods and asks the others to follow her, letting them know that she just feels compelled for one reason or another. As she continues to follow, Orem and Dariax both also feel this strange compulsion that she does, and convince the rest of the party to follow. As they speak with each other along the way, some backstory is spilled, and we learn certain things like Dorian had a pretty good upbringing and has a brother, but that he also doesn't exactly want to tell more about his backstory. Again, something is weird and off with Dorian. However, as they have these conversations, it's noticed that Fern's eyes are beginning to look more and more goat-like, and it's almost like she's becoming more attuned to nature as she continues moving forward. Eventually, they have no choice but to abandon the cart as the foliage is too thick and continue on foot. They reach an open glade, and there's a weird gate at the center of it, and immediately Fern recognizes this as she realizes that this is how she came through the Feywild into the material plane. All around them, the foliage is bright and intense, and it's very obvious that they are in some sort of intersection between the material plane and the Feywild. The closer Fern gets, the more this arch begins to glow, and Fern continues to feel this strong pull to want to go through it, back into the Feywild. As she's contemplating going through it for real, suddenly a different figure begins to step through, one mirroring Fern, but rather than the bright and colorful fur and clothing, she has sooty black skin, long dark hair, and a hardened face. It looks like Fern, but different, aged, corrupted almost, and the most obvious difference being the thorned crown that rests upon her head. She beckons Fern to come home back through the gate and says, "I found my power. Come find yours." As this occurs, out of nowhere, Abria begins to speak about a different character, a strange fire-haired individual, and suddenly, a new character, a black-clad fire ganassi named Firai, steps out and tells this strange, alternate version of Fern she will make that decision in her own time, not yours. With this happening, suddenly a new player enters the table, something I genuinely didn't know was going to happen and got kind of hyped about. This character is Firai, the Fire Ganassi, played by Anjali, and I genuinely didn't know that she was actually going to be joining this campaign, so seeing her suddenly show up really had me excited. I love seeing new characters suddenly enter the table. But with her arrival, combat begins, and suddenly they are fighting this strange faux Fern from a different timeline. Right off the bat, I genuinely found this combat super exciting and engaging because it's very odd to have to fight a different version of yourself. Abria plays around with the strange time magic that happens when you enter and exit the Feywild and makes this gate a way of being able to see an alternate version of Fern, and I genuinely found this interesting. It shows as a way of introducing the crown as a dark and dangerous object while still allowing you to be able to see something in your character, and the idea of having to fight your own character, I don't know, it just really makes me excited, and I think Abria did an amazing job with this combat encounter. The encounter itself, however, does not typically last long, especially with this new character of Firai showing up. She's a very capable monk, and with her help and a lot of beating up on this strange Fern, they manage to badly wound her, and as she staggers back into the gate, suddenly they are able to see different creatures waiting on the other side, wanting to come through. But before they can, Firai finishes off this faux Fern with a strong strike straight to her body, which causes it to fully disintegrate into ash. As they finish the combat off, an elven woman clad in purple at the edge of the glaive steps out, extending her hand. As she looks at the aftermath of the battle, her eyes fall on the party, and she says, "What have you done?" As she says this, the rest of the party realizes that Opal has been left unconscious at the end of this fight, and Opal is once again in that strange dream place, in a dark place face to face with her twin, Ted. And immediately Ted accuses her of being selfish and arrogant. See, in this battle, Opal still didn't have her magic, and many times Ted told her that all she needed to get her magic back was to just apologize for the way she treated her, but Opal refused, trying to fight with only her daggers against the many foes before them. Because of this, Opal was downed, and Ted is incredibly angry, and while Opal doesn't quite understand, suddenly Ted lashes out saying, "You don't even know what I gave up." This takes Opal off guard, and she's confused, and she lashes back out asking what the hell that means. Ted is unable to elaborate, too emotional, and eventually simply offers, "I'll return them to you, but you have to take care of yourself because I can't fix this for you." This is a very emotional moment between two sisters, and while the two of them simply don't understand each other, they both come to an agreement, and Opal apologizes, in some ways at least. While this happens, Fern casts Cure Wounds on Opal, and she brings her back to consciousness. Meanwhile, the elven woman, who's known as Mirata Nisalor, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, I really don't know how it's pronounced, even after hearing Abria say it. But she informs them that she's from the city of Singorn. She and her fellow guards had come on the behest of the High Warden, and they wanted to come to deal with the leaking energy from the Feywild and close up the gap that's been causing it to come into the material plane. Immediately they get to work doing so, striking these strange metal spikes into the veins of the crystals running along the ground in order to be able to prevent the Feywild from spreading further. With this strange new arrival clearly not of danger, they turn their attention to Fira Rai in order to be able to talk to her and figure out who she is. She joins the party, but there's not much information given about her, except for the fact that, with some insight checks, they know that she's at least to be trusted in some regards. She insists that she is simply there to protect them, and that is all she has ever been there for. And they agree, and with that, they're all on their way to the walled town of Byrodin. See, Byrodin is where Opal came from, and she's clearly unhappy to be going back here. She makes it very clear that she wanted to leave Byrodin and not look back, but now they're required to go here in order to be able to get where they're going, and it's a simple stopping point along the way. Almost immediately, Opal is recognized at the gate, as this is a relatively small town where pretty much everyone knows everybody. I mean, it's literally called Byrodin because it's by the road. They're greeted pretty warmly, and it's actually made clear that there's some sort of pageant going on called the Gem of Byrodin, and it turns out that Opal actually used to be the winner of this pageant known as the Gem of Byrodin. They're invited to compete, and actually everybody's pretty excited about it. Now, the entire festival itself, I'm not going to recap a ton, but I will just let you know that it was a ton of fun. There's not a whole lot here story-wise. This is really just the players enjoying themselves, and if you are a fan of just seeing players being idiots playing D&D, this is the thing for you to watch. Tons of hijinks, a lot of stupid decisions, a lot of very fun roleplay moments, and generally just a lot of players trying to lift each other up and have a great time in the stupid beauty pageant-ish type scenario is a ton of fun, especially seeing the character that Leah makes up on the fly, as well as the character Njali makes up as well. And all in all, it's just a ton of fun and a lot of fun to watch. Recapping it won't be that entertaining, but I promise you, if you go watch this session, at least watch the last part of it, you will not be disappointed. But in the end, through the support of her teammates, Opal wins the title of the Gem of Byrodin once again, and she begins to feel actually a little bit happier despite being pretty sad and disappointed of being at home. Especially since she found out that her sister, Ted, was no longer there, and in fact had left a little after she did, and nobody knew where Ted was. As everything begins to wind down, Opal heads back to her old home and in the small room she used to share with her twin sister. As she thinks about her sister, she takes off her crown, the one that she had just won as being the Gem of Byrodin, and decides to leave it on Ted's bed. Now, it's not something I've mentioned until this point, but it's been pretty clear that there was a sort of tension between Ted and Opal, as Opal was always considered the talented and beautiful one, and Ted was considered the sort of social outcast, almost. So seeing Opal take this gesture of being able to put the crown that she once held so dearly and put it on Ted's bed, a sort of symbolic act of giving it to Ted, was very sweet and I think a very nice character moment. It shows that Opal's grown and this is not something that she wants anymore, she wants something more. But she still wants her sister to be able to experience the amazing comfort and support that she once did in having that title. And I think that's very sweet and a great character moment. But with that being done, Session 4 comes to an end, and so does this portion of the review. My thoughts on it? Honestly, I very much enjoyed these two sessions. It was pretty slow, and it took me a while to get into it, but by the end of this last session was when I really started to feel with this campaign. And I guarantee you the next several sessions are what really solidified that I very much enjoyed this campaign and made me very happy that I had slogged through the bits I didn't like in order to be able to get to this. In fact, it's even the next several sessions that made me really want to do this series and be able to recap everything so that everybody else could know the amazing story that was told, even if they didn't have the time to be able to put that commitment in. From this point on, the story gets pretty deep and we get to see more of the characters, and I begin to really grow attached to everybody, and I'm very excited to talk about it. But until then, all of you beautiful bastards better go out into the world and make it your own. Don't forget to have a great day, and never forget to play a role. Thank you, come again, and tune in next time for sessions 5 through 6.